Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Visionary Voices, the College President's Playbook, is an insightful podcast dedicated to the strategic minds leading today's higher ed institutions. Each episode brings a unique perspective from visionary and tech-forward college presidents, chancellors, and other high-level academic leaders, diving into the complexities and nuances of running a modern educational institution. This show is hosted by Dr. Brian Gross, Vice President for Enrollment Management and Athletics at Hartwick College, and is a valuable resource for current and aspiring leaders in academia, offering a playbook of visionary ideas and practical solutions for the ever-evolving landscape of higher ed. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Visionary Voices wherever you get your podcasts.
The term professional development means building skill sets that will help you succeed in the future, whatever role that might look like for you.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 46 of the Mission Admissions podcast. And now that I've been doing this show for more than 2 years, it's clear that leadership is a topic that many of you care a lot about, as do I. 6 of the top 10 most downloaded episodes of Mission Admissions contain leadership content, and I'm excited to have another very talented leader join me today, Dr. Jay Jacobs. Jay and I first connected, I had to think about this, Jay, on Twitter years ago, and then if my memory serves me correctly, we finally met in 2019 at, I think, the NACAC National Conference. I know it was a conference somewhere. It was in Louisville that year, at least NACAC. And I just remember that you and I sat in the hotel lobby and had coffee together and talked about leadership marketing and a whole bunch of other topics. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. Your memory matches my memory. I think it was Louisville. And since then, it's been fun to stay connected. We've gotten to the opportunity to chat on the phone a few times and stay connected online. So it's always good to be with you.
It is, and it's really cool to see you having the success that the University of Vermont is having now, and you're obviously in a VP role there. And so I'm excited to dig into a handful of things today, including something really cool that I learned about regarding an Emerging Leaders Academy that you all are doing. So here's where I'd love to start, though, Jay. So you started your higher ed admissions career in 2009 as a counselor at the College of New Jersey. And then eventually you moved to Colgate, and eventually you find your way to Miami, and now you're at Vermont. Do you remember thinking at some point early on, oh yeah, I want to keep doing this, and like leadership is probably the path that I'm going to take? Or, because I'm always curious to know at what point it just kind of clicks for a lot of people in higher ed. Hey, I think leadership's something I want to do.
Yes, I do remember the point. I was an entry-level admissions officer at the College of New Jersey. Well, let me back up. I was a tour guide at my alma mater, St. Lawrence University in Northern New York. I loved that role. I stuck around a summer and was a summer intern. I was like a fellow or whatever the senior, student position was called my senior year. But I saw a lot of my upperclassmen friends go off into higher ed, res life roles, admissions roles, student affairs roles, those kinds of things. And I always thought, well, what a cop out. I just spent 160 grand or whatever it was for my economics degree at that point, and I figured I should at least give it a whirl. So what you won't find on my LinkedIn or in my resume anywhere is that I did B2B sales for a handful of months in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, working for Verizon. I hated every second of that job and quit maybe 2 or 3 months deep and served tables for the remainder of that year. And I called up a mentor of mine, Terry Cowdery, who was the dean of St. Lawrence at the time. And I told her, you know what, I've been reflecting and I'm just really where I feel most comfortable is a college campus. How the heck do I get a college admissions job? And she helped me kind of navigate that process and ended up landing at TCNJ, which was outstanding. And about a year deep, I knew that I was right. And I invested in myself. I enrolled in Drexel's master's program and just kind of kept on going. And yeah, it was really early. I was probably 23, 24 years old where I thought, you know what I want to do is be a dean of admissions or a VP of admissions or whatever the chief admissions or enrollment officer is at an institution. Over time, asked a lot of people how you do that and took relatively thoughtful and prescribed steps to get to the seat where I am today.
What attracted you, though, to that role and the idea of a leadership role? What was it that, like, to your point, where you were like, yep, I want to do that one day?
I saw my boss at the College of New Jersey, who was the dean of admissions at the time and now the VP for enrollment, Lisa Angeloni, working on really interesting stuff. A lot of people in our roles and will say that the reason we do what we do is, the student interaction and, helping students through this process. And yes, that is something that is fun and important to me, but it's not my why. It's not my number one. My why is this big puzzle that we get to put together every single year. It's a mind exercise. It's a definition of leadership, right? It's like working with other people to achieve the same goal. And every single year there's a new curveball. Every single year there's a new obstacle. Every single year there's a new challenge that me, my team, our campus, the collective we that needs to work synchronously together to achieve our enrollment goals have to adjust to and pivot for. And that is the reason every single year I sign up to do it again.
One, I love that you have some clear definition. You called it your why. We talk a lot about the importance of that. And Jay, I see way too many, and I have way too many conversations, I feel like, throughout the year with middle managers in higher ed who are like, well, it's just the next logical step for me. I'm like, yeah, but why do you want to do it? And your why doesn't have to be, to your point, well, because I love serving students and families. Yeah, that's a why for a lot of people in higher ed, but I love for you, it's just, hey, I love being the person who gets to help put together this puzzle and play an integral role. I want to circle back there. You mentioned something about investing in yourself and doing the program you did at Drexel. So we talk a lot about professional development, not just in higher ed, but for all of us in our professional careers. So what does the term professional development mean to you?
That's a good question. I think the term professional development means building skill sets that will help you succeed in the future, whatever role that might look like for you as an individual. And there's a number of different ways that you can go about getting that. And like you just said, Jeremy, I chose to invest in myself. So, right, I took some of that professional development onus on my own shoulders. And then I've been lucky where I've been tapped by leaders, friends, mentors, colleagues to take advantage of other professional development opportunities.
Well, and that leads me to another thing I wanted to ask you about, because I feel like there has to be that balance, to your point, in saying, all right, I'm going to initiate some of this. It doesn't matter if I'm a junior admissions counselor, I'm a director wanting to be a vice president, whatever it is. So what are your thoughts, or talk to me about the balance between being responsible for your own professional development and the role that a supervisor should play in the development of their staff?
One of the early pieces of advice I received in my career. I was an entry-level admissions officer at TCNJ. I had just finished my master's program at Drexel. I was golfing with one of our, lead operations guys. And I just gotten the job offer from Colgate, and he was a good mentor of mine. And I was kind of struggling with what do I do? As an entry level admission officer at TCNJ, I oversaw their orientation program. So summer, when you typically leave an admissions job, was a really bad time for me to leave an admissions job. And so I said, Robbie, I don't know what to do. Like, leaving now would be terrible for you all and for the institution and for these 3,000 students we just enrolled. Robbie told me, Jay, no one's ever going to look out for yourself except for yourself. Meaning, what he was telling me is like, there's no good time to leave a job, right? There's always going to be a transition, no matter with whatever's on your plate, whatever's on your desk, whatever's in your project list. And that really stuck with me. And so, from then on, it was like, okay, no holds bar. I can advocate for myself and at least ask the supervisors or leaders in my division or unit, I want to participate in X. I want to go to Y conference. I want to, have this experience. How can I get that? Or can you support me in that? The worst they can tell you is no. And so it's sticking your neck out there and putting some risk. Take some methodical looks at what are the skill sets or what are the experiences that you need in order to get to the next step. Now, so a lot of that onus is on your shoulders. Now, of course, the role of a supervisor is to hear your employees when they're asking that and genuinely assess yes or no, or again, going back to our earlier conversation, the why. What are the skills? Walk me through how this experience or opportunity is going to help you in your current role or get you where you want to be in the future. So, I think listening and genuinely assessing, but also the role of a supervisor is not, that kind of passive reaction to employees asking you, but also snuffing out talent and investing in that talent. We all know, especially in leadership positions or any supervisory role, right, that the people under us could churn and burn at any time. So it's up to us to make sure that we are building a deep bench, if you want to use a sports analogy, so that you can seamlessly transition from employee to employee, because you never know who's going to provide their resignation on your desk this afternoon.
It's a very good point. And I find it interesting because, and this is probably one of the higher ed hills, we'll call it, Jay, that I will die on, which is, give me your thoughts on this statement. I find too many senior leaders have way too many responsibilities, and not necessarily intentionally in most cases, but it leads to them not investing like they need to in their staff. Thoughts on that statement?
I mean, I think that statement's 100% accurate. I'm thinking of just my responsibilities here at UVM. I oversee 4 big and influential departments. And I grew up in the admissions world, right? So I don't know much about the financial aid regulations. I don't know much about the bursar functions. I don't know much about the registrar's office. So I need to lean on those teammates and those employees to be experts in what they do and provide sound advice to me, come to me when they know they need a senior level decision maker. But also, I need to trust them. And in order for me to trust them, I need to know that they've had these types of opportunities, that they've had these types of experiences, that they have friends and colleagues and mentors at other institutions that they can pick up the phone and call and ask for advice. To your prior question, that's my role as their supervisor, is how can I be sure that they are tapping into these networks or having these experiences to be experts in their field, so that I don't need to know every single thing about their verticals.
So besides obviously putting trust in other senior leaders that you manage, help me understand, because here's thoughts that go through my brain. We all need to say no more. right? So there's that component of, leadership among other things. But then I also think, is the org structure in a lot of cases part of the problem? Meaning, if I'm a director of admissions and I have 15 people who report to me, and I have these other, we'll call it growth responsibilities, or developmental responsibilities in terms of like strategic planning, how do I give those people the time they need? Do I need those middle people to be able to manage those people? So I can like, talk to me about any of that. Do you feel like any of that is part of the solution for a lot of leaders?
It certainly could be. I mean, if I came to a place where my director of admissions had 15 direct reports, I would immediately say that is too many direct reports. How are you going to do your job well when you have 15 people coming to you every single day with silly, simple questions that a director of admissions doesn't necessarily need to be answering? Now, I don't know if, adding middle level managers makes the sense at every single institution. But at a school like UVM, yeah, if there were 15 people reporting into the director of admissions, I would say that was too much. But it's this. You're right, Jeremy. It's this fine balance of being a people leader and a functional leader, that leaders need to strike. And I try, and maybe I'm not perfect at this, but I try to give our leaders in enrollment management the ability to shape their organizations how they need to shape them. They have complete control of their operating budget, so they can determine, what percentage goes to professional development lines and things like that, so long as there are clear expectations, right? Here are the goals and expectations I have. Here are the enrollment goals we need to meet for the institution. Get them done however you can get them done.
I love that you hit on the importance there of setting expectations. Again, things that you might think don't make a big deal, but yet make a big deal. And as I have conversations throughout the year on all these campuses I'm on, I oftentimes find that the younger staff, Jay, don't have those clear expectations, or the way it was communicated, didn't land the way leadership was hoping. And, there's some confusion there. Knowing you have to juggle all of those things as a senior leader. If I'm a senior leader listening to this and I'm struggling with this idea of isolation, and I've talked about this with other senior leaders on a podcast, who do you lean on, Jay, for advice? Not necessarily just advice on, hey, how can I be a better VP, but just how can I be a better leader? How can I serve my team better? Are there specific people in your life that you're comfortable sharing that you lean on a lot?
There are dozens of people I lean on in my life. I mentioned, kind of the network mentors, colleagues at outside at other institutions that I call. John Haller at the University of Miami is someone on speed dial. Terry Cowdery, who I mentioned earlier, is on speed dial. Karen Long, who I worked for at Miami, is on speed dial. I mean, there are Lisa that I mentioned earlier. There are tons of them, but there are also senior leaders here internally who I talk with for sure. Erica Calero, our VP for Student Affairs, she and I started here right around the same time in our senior leadership roles, so we can commiserate on our growth trends together, things like that. I go to Carrie Castano, the Provost Chief of Staff. Man, she's probably sick of getting Teams calls from me, but she's been here a long time. She understands the place, she understands the culture, she understands the policies on like what can and cannot be done. So that's, anytime I have a proposal written before I send to my boss, I make sure Carrie's eyes are on it first, those kinds of things. And then, personally, right, there's a ton of people that you call on to celebrate your successes with and cry over some failed attempts with and things like that. And, here I of course need to shout out my wife, Callie Jacobs, who's, she and I met in the admissions world. So she understands our world a little bit. And Callie is always there to, again, celebrate my successes and provide a shoulder to cry on if I need it.
One, I love that you gave a ton of people their flowers. And at the end of the day, I mean, we all need people. That's the point. And I'm glad you made it, because I'm finding way too many senior leaders again. They've got one or two people, and that's great. But expanding your network and being comfortable having those conversations with people, whether it's, like you said, people who are peers in your role, people who aren't even in your role but work at your institution, and people who are completely outside of higher ed and may or may not have any higher ed background. I think it's important for all of us to be able to have that circle. One of the reasons I reached out to you, and one of the things I really wanted to hear you talk about, is this really cool leadership opportunity that you all have created at Vermont called the Emerging Leaders Academy. It's designed for a high potential group of aspiring and emerging enrollment management team members. But can you talk to us about, like, how did that program come about, Jay? Where did it come from? What are the goals? If somebody's looking at saying, okay, what can I do within my org to potentially start something similar? Walk us through what that looked like there.
The idea was not a novel idea. I stole it from John at Miami. John did this for us at Miami. What I did here at UVM is a little bit different. I looked at, we had a cohort of 10 enrollment professionals, proportionally represented by the different units under the enrollment management umbrella. We did a nomination process. Colleagues could nominate colleagues. You could nominate yourself. And then me and our senior enrollment team kind of went through our nominations and picked those 10. The idea was to, again, build up skills and knowledge that would help people in their day-to-day jobs and in what could be transferred to a higher level position in the future. We wanted to be sure that, again, that we are investing in our team. And then selfishly, right, we want to build a deep bench and make sure that we have some succession planning happening. So what we did was, over the last year, I think we started in September of last year and we ended in May. And monthly, we had 2-hour long sessions that were either focused on leadership development. So, I invited John Haller to come and talk about your own leadership style. We had Jess and Jen from EM Powerhouse on how do you build productive teams. We had a local headhunter who lives here locally but works for Isaacson Miller on, like, how do you work with a search firm and how do you build a resume and what kinds of questions should you be asking or what sorts of jobs should you be looking at, those kinds of things. And on the other month sessions, we did kind of higher ed administration, and that's where I leaned on colleagues here at UVM. So the CFO and the budget director came in and talked about higher ed finance and budgeting. We had our chief human resource officer come in and talk about HR administration. We had president and the provost and a dean of our College of Engineering and Mathematical Sciences come in and talk about strategic planning, how to run an institution, how to run a college, those kinds of things. So the idea was to kind of start to broaden lenses than the residency officer doing residency work in the registrar's office every single day, or our scholarship administrator who's pulling down endowed funds out of a fund and distributing them out every single day. I wanted to be sure to kind of broaden those lenses so that they could understand, like, how is their job, their narrow job that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, contributing to the enrollment goals or the campus writ large, but also wanted to make sure that they were building skills that could help them grow in the future.
What's the biggest thing that surprised you about year one of that program?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me was how that alone facilitated interdepartmental communication and collaboration. One of our compliance guru in our student financial services office was one of our inaugural members, and one of our admission officers who does transfer and in-state admissions were on Banner here, needed Banner access for something very specific. And Joey and SFS said, well, I can help with that, right? And it was just like those kinds of conversations that I didn't facilitate, right? They were it happened, in the 15 minutes before the session started or during a break or something like that, where they can connect with one another, build those relationships, and help each other in the here and now, not necessarily in the future.
And so I'm curious, how do you leave the program with those who quote unquote graduate from it? Meaning, does it then basically fall on them to continue their own growth development, some of the things we've been talking about, or help me understand and help everybody listening understand okay, now here's what you do with all of this stuff?
A little secret is, I was kind of building this program as we were running it. So I haven't, thought through all of those kinds of nuances and details. In fact, the last session was kind of a feedback session. How can I make this better for next year's cohort? And that was exactly something that somebody asked me, Jeremy, and I was like, oh man, how did I not think of this? So, I brought it back to our directors. Our directors are, making sure that they know who the graduates are so that they can tap them for intercampus committees or search committees in-house, those kinds of things. I am bringing back the most recent graduating cohort next year so that they can kind of connect with next year's cohort who we need to pick here in the next few days, that kind of stuff. So I think we need to put a little bit more meat on that bone in the future, but it's definitely something that we're thinking about.
Well, and I didn't mean to call you out there because obviously I didn't know, but I appreciate your transparency. And the reason I brought that up, Jay, is again, as somebody, and I've shared this before on the pod, part of the work I do when I go lead training workshops for different admissions and marketing teams is I meet one-on-one with every single person from senior leadership down to the brand newest person. And oftentimes I'll hear something similar about it could be a training on anything they do or content that they're given to like learn. It's kind of cool. What do we do with all this? Or, okay, am I supposed to? So just making sure, the phrase I like to use, Jay, is connect the dots anytime you're doing training on anything, right? The topic is irrelevant. It's just, all right, what do you want this person then to hopefully take away that allows them to make something better or, continue a growth process, right?
Use your parlance, connecting those dots are important. And luckily, the people in this past year's emerging leaders program were vocal in that dots needed to be connected and came with some solutions on like, here are some things that we would like to do now that we've graduated. Here are some dots that we'd like to get connected to.
You've done now higher ed for double-digit years. So what else have you found, Jay, wherever it's been, that works well when it comes to getting different campus partners to understand what each other actually do? Because I think a lot of times that's step one, right? Is, oh yeah, I know what Jay and his team over there do. Yeah, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Like, what else have you done, whether it's activities, specific types of cross training, anything that's really you found worked well from a collaborative standpoint?
Yeah, we there's things both, big and flashy, but also small and simple that can help, I think. So one thing that I do is I send a monthly newsletter out to my team, the whole division, where I give them some simple resources that I found helpful over the past few months. There's one thing to read, there's one thing to watch, there's one thing to listen to, and then there's one UVM specific resource, and I try to kind of rotate through what that content looks like. It might be admissions focused one month, might be aid focused the next month, might be registrar focused the next month, etc. That helps my team start to understand what these different departments within enrollment are doing. One thing that we also do internally to enrollment is what we call slam meetings, where I get my direct reports in a room and their direct reports in a room a handful of times a year, where they know who each other are and what each other are doing at any given time of the year. And then one thing that we've been doing, I inherited this from my predecessor here at UVM, actually, is an enrollment summer academy where we do a mini kind of conference sessions over the course of a day early summer and invite campus partners to. So, admissions does a case studies program where they kind of open the hood and like, how do we review applications? The registrar office has done, how do they schedule courses? The financial aid office has done, how do we, without giving too much of the secret sauce away, how do we come up with our financial aid regimens, things like that. This year, we did something a little bit different, and we actually partnered with our colleagues in student affairs and did it around a theme of kind of civil discourse, where student affairs did really interesting panels on like, how do we have hard conversations with students from a staff perspective and a faculty perspective. We've just came out of a fraught year. We're betting next year is going to be fraught as well with a presidential election coming up. And then my team did like, how do we react to policies that we can't control, right? So admissions did a SCOTUS session, financial aid did the FAFSA simplification debacle session, things like we had a FERPA session, things like that. It was really interesting, but it also allows us to be a little bit more in the spotlight on campus with campus partners to understand, oh, what they're doing in enrollment impacts me this way.
I end every podcast, Jay, with something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm going to give you a handful of things, and I just want some quick feedback and first thoughts from you, okay?
Sure.
Which is better, a Vermont day at the beach or a Miami day at the beach?
Oof. I hope my colleagues in Vermont aren't listening. I'll take a Miami day at the beach. That water is just too warm to pass up.
Your favorite Ben & Jerry's ice cream flavor?
The Tonight Dough.
Is a maple creamy better than Ben & Jerry's?
Yes.
I didn't know what a maple creamy was, but apparently it's soft serve ice cream with maple.
Vermont.
It's a Vermont staple.
It's Vermont's version of soft serve ice cream. I'm not a Vermonter, so I will say that it's soft serve ice cream. Vermonters will tell you why it's a creamy and not soft serve ice cream. You won't have a maple creamy until you've had a maple black raspberry twist. It sounds wacky, but once you have it, you'll understand why.
You're a big Buffalo Bills fan, which may or may not be a good thing. What place will the Buffalo Bills finish this year in the AFC?
Super Bowl champs.
Not sure I'd be a betting man on that one, but I love that you're a strong supporter of your team. Best Pearl Jam song, what is it?
Oh, man, that's like asking my favorite child. I'll go a live version of Porch.
Have you been to a concert of theirs?
I've been to 15 Pearl Jam concerts, and I have 16, 17, and 18 planned for this summer.
I love it. And how would your parents describe what you do, Jay?
Oh, that would be an absolutely hysterical answer. Help students get to college.
That seems to be the answer that most people, when I ask that question, comes up with. Jay, I appreciate you just being on and sharing so many things that I think are going to help a lot of people who are in leadership positions or even people who are contemplating leadership positions. So I appreciate you being on and sharing things with me today, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for doing your homework. Those rapid fire questions were fun. You know me well.
I try to remember things that I find out along the way. Jay, if anybody wants to reach out to you, because you mentioned this earlier, and so I'm going to get your permission first. You're good with them utilizing and finding you on LinkedIn or emailing you?
You got it. LinkedIn, Jay Jacobs, or jason.jacobs@uvm.edu.
Awesome. I look forward to our next conversation together, Jay.
Thanks, Jeremy. Good to see you.
Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451. the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.